Okay, so I thought I'd do a little tour player case study here, and we're going to go back in time a little bit to what I would say would be a hero of mine. He was certainly an inspiration to many golfers, and I was included in that. One of the reasons sort of I took up the game was watching Seve play. So I've managed to get hold of some old footage, and on the left hand side we've got some very early footage of Seve, and on the right hand side some latter footage. And I think there's a few things that we can learn here when we look at putting as a skill, what makes a great putter. And there's no doubt Seve was a great putter. His short game and ability to hold those crucial putts was unbelievable. I mean, I think everyone remembers that putt at St Andrews on the last, somehow found a way into the hole. So he was a very skillful golfer, and particularly skillful on and around the greens. So the video footage that I have on the left is quite early on. I don't quite know the exact sort of time frame, but we can just tell it's very early on in his career. And in particular, when you look at his technique as well, you can see it wasn't quite the same as to what we might remember in the latter stages of his career. And it shows you that, Seve, I think, clearly worked on certain elements of his putting throughout his career to refine that skill. But let's take a dive in. Let's sort of look at what we see. So on the left here, the immediate thing that you can notice is how kind of bent over Seve is. It's almost like Michelle Wee-like, isn't it? That we remember of late, sort of with the spine very much almost perpendicular to the ground. So he's very bent over. We can't quite see the ball position there because of the video footage, but through that line of the shaft we can see the ball. He's going to be well forward in his stance and well outside of his head or ear position, and we see a lot of flex in his arms because he's so bent over. His arms aren't rigid by any means; they're very, very flexed. So let's just sort of play that video. I'll draw a line which is sort of the original shaft position. And the immediate thing that I kind of see as we start to go back is how much Seve starts to use his hands and arms very early in the stroke. We can see the right arm kind of flex more, the right wrist starts to extend. And then as a consequence, that left arm starts to get sort of pulled with it. So the club starts to rotate quite a lot in plane. So when I say the club rotate, I'm not talking about the face. I'm talking about the shaft in terms of the loft rotation. So we've got quite a lot of in-plane motion. And so he's very, very handsy. His, right hand, and right forearm, I think, are very much sort of driving force of initiating that movement back. A lot of people talk about you shouldn't use your hands in the putting stroke. Well, we all do. Some of the greatest putters that have ever lived use their hands. But I think it's more about how best do I coordinate my stroke, and Seve kind of worked out what he needed to do in that sense throughout his whole career. So let's go back to the stroke here, and we go obviously see that very right arm sort of pull back, and then coming into the downswing. So this is top of the backswing. I just draw a line up the shaft. When I talk about the in-plane rotation, we can sort of see how low that dissects the original starting line or original shaft position. So as we come now into the downswing, what I would say is that sort of the angle in that right wrist, stays a similar angle into the sort of transition first part of the downstroke. And the handle is starting to get close to that original shaft position. But then very late on, Seve starts to release that shaft. And what we can see on the forward swing here, particularly close to impact, how that right arm works, how that right wrist works. That right arm's working like a piston, and that right hand's really releasing the shaft. So he's got quite a late release of the shaft, but one of the things that he was able to do is to really match up that shaft angle at impact. So that kind of matching up the shaft, I think, is very important. That's a big factor in determining your face angle as well as your launch conditions. So you can see how much hands and arms Seve's using, but he's got the skill and the ability to line up that shaft at impact. Now, if we look at the video on the right hand side, we see an older Seve, but equally as skillful. You're not quite as bent over. You could argue ball position is slightly further back, got a little bit more shaft lean at setup. Arms look a little bit longer. So although it's not necessarily you would call orthodox, it's looking closer to orthodox. But for me, it's still the same traits. You look at that right arm there, we see some in-plane rotation of the shaft. Putter looks like it will travel quite low as that right arm sort of pulls away. Doesn't look like there's as much flex in that right arm, but that right arm is certainly moving and pulling that club back, and that left arm lengthens. So again, still a fair amount of like in-plane rotation of the club. And then we'll work into the downswing here. And again, one of the things that Seve does quite well is, even though the club's rotated quite a lot in plane, he's able to match that on the downswing. So the shaft lines up fairly well there. I see at times a lot of people that have a lot of in-plane rotation and the shaft going back, they actually struggle to match it. So you can see there that Seve's technique evolved over the years. It had its traits, very much, I would say, right arm dominant, putting stroke. But he refined it. The question that I think, as golfers we need to ask ourselves is, what's the most efficient way for you to coordinate the club? Okay, we all move our hands and arms. We all, to a certain degree, all move our torso. It's how we coordinate those different segments in the most efficient manner. Now, whether that's through trial and error or whether that was through the coaching that Seve had, you can see that he's refined the coordination of those segments through his career. And he latter stages of his career, I think he was well known as a great putter. So it's work in progress, isn't it? And it's trying to work out what is the most efficient way for you to coordinate, move all those different segments and control your start line, control your speed. And there's a lot that we can learn from, some of the great putters in the past. They have their own way of doing things, but they are able to make it work. And I think that's the most important thing. Are you able to make your putting stroke work? They say that success leaves clues, and I think Seve left quite a few clues for us to study. So, what a great legend of the game. Shame he's not here with us, but always enjoy watching him putt.